Hey guys, I'm out here in the backfield and I just wanted to do, while I'm taking a little break, it's a really nice day, but I still kind of want to take a break. I want to film a video talking about parasites. Now, I talk about parasites a lot. It's extremely relevant for farmers, especially if you have animals. You know, all animals can get parasites, from as small as cats to as big as cows, you know. Even birds. Like, there are all kinds of parasites out there, and sometimes, like, depending on the animal, you're fighting an uphill battle, like you'll know. And there's lots of people out there that still, not everybody watches all of our videos, and sometimes I know when I have my little like teaching moments, people kind of click off because it's like, ugh, we don't want to listen. And you might be tired of hearing about parasites. I'm tired of talking about it, but the thing is, I can never stop talking about it, and I can never stop learning and continuing to keep up to date on information about parasites, because they're never going away. They will never go away. I don't care where you are, they will never go away. And if you have animals, it is absolutely, I think, important for you to know about them, whether your animals struggle with them or not. And I mean animals like livestock, because it's very easy to preventative care for like cats and dogs and such. But for livestock, the care for it is a lot harder, especially when we start talking into like medication resistance. You have to make a lot of decisions that sometimes are really, really tough for your livestock. And so I want to share this because I hope that maybe someday, even though I talk about it all the time, I'm hoping the more I talk about it, the more the information can get out there. And if there's somebody who is just beat down and in a situation like I was with the parasites, just not knowing what to do, getting conflicting information from everywhere, like maybe here's some tips that you can try, and here's what we've been doing. So first, let's talk about parasites, okay? This is gonna be a yapping video, sit down yapping. Maybe the goats will come see me, I don't know. But first, let's talk about them. So the parasites that we deal with in Texas, that is the worst right now, is barber pole worms, okay? But to understand that, only certain animals can get certain parasites. You know, like you'll hear about tapeworms, you'll hear about liver flukes, you'll hear about lungworms, you'll hear about all these different things. I'm just going to give you a heads up right now. The goats are coming near me. I might have to turn the side-by-side on and move in the middle of this video just because they will cause a ruckus. So we're just going to hope they kind of keep their distance. They're slowly making their way towards me. But another thing about parasites is most parasites, not all, I know the ones that we are dealing with. So a lot of my research goes towards the things that we deal with. The ones that we deal with, like barber pole, coccidia, tapeworm, all of that, they are host specific, which all that means is they are species specific. Host specific means you're referring to the host, which is the species. So can cows get barber pole worms? Absolutely. But are your cows going to get barber pole worms from your goats? No, because I'm not going to completely rule it out. There have been crazy things that have happened, but the research that I've read and what I've heard from vets says that no, it's host specific. So if your goats have barber pole worms, or any parasite that's host specific, let's put it that way. But we're saying barber pole worms because that's the worms that we struggle with right now here in Texas with our herd, and most people are struggling with right now. When the animals get the parasites in their tummy, they then, as a part of the life cycle, I'll pop a little visual up here on the screen so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. They will then, in their feces, the eggs will come out in their feces. And then what will happen is, if the poop just stays dormant, it's not moved around, all those kind of things, then the eggs hatch and they form the larvae that then crawl up the blades of grass, move around in the grass, and are then picked up in the grass when the goats graze. And that's how it gets back into the goat, and the life cycle continues from there. Same thing in cows with their barber pole worms. Now, coccidia is a little bit different, but I think the premise is kind of still the same, of it goes onto the ground, through the feces, all of that kind of thing. You know, from what I understand, that's how a lot of the life cycles work. And so with that, you know, your cows, if they do pick up a goat strain of barber pole worms, it will go into their stomach and die, because they are not a suitable host for those worms. Same thing if you have a cow that has barber pole worms and a goat picks it up, it will die in their stomach because it is not a suitable host for them, which is great because you can have multiple animals on a pasture and be okay. So if you have a cow that's perfectly healthy and then you bring in a new cow and all of a sudden your other cow starts getting worms, don't jump to the conclusion that it's your goats. You should assume that the cow you brought in probably had worms and has now given it to your new cow, or they're just in your ground. You know, it is what it is. So host specific is very important. From there, you move on to what do you do to prevent worms? You know, deworming, obviously. That's the obvious like go-to thing and preventative. Now, with that, especially in goats and sheep, the small ruminants, because we're having to deworm so often because they do not handle the worm burden as well as bigger animals do. Goats just do not handle sickness well. People have started to have to overworm them, worm them a lot, where normally the practice used to be worm them either 2 times a year or 4 times a year, change of seasons, just depends on how you do it. Now people are, I have people telling me they're worming them like every month, and that's okay if that's what your vet is suggesting and that's what you feel comfortable doing, but there is a risk with that. You're risking creating what we call super worms, meaning dewormer resistant worms, to where those will not die from the dewormer, they will continue to become resistant and they will breed dewormer resistant babies. And then you've got a real problem. So that's why you circulate chemical dewormers. You can do feed-based dewormers, you can do chemical dewormers. Those are kind of your like actions. Those are your like treatments. Your preventatives, of course, deworming is a treatment and a preventative. You can prevent with dewormer. Again, it depends on what you're doing with your herd. For us specifically, the way our deworming works, oh, here come the goats. Okay, hold on, I'll be back. Okay, I moved. Now you can see them and we can see when they come up on me. So our current deworming protocol that we have decided, and I say our as in just Ellie and I, this is what we've worked through with our vets, and I say multiple vets and A&M, what we've chosen is best for our animals is we do not monthly deworm and we do not seasonally deworm. We deworm based on symptoms. And so that means if you see a goat start to have any kind of symptoms, and it's important to note that sometimes they will be like showing very minimal symptoms. So that just means I have a lot more work to do in medical checks, meaning I have to check their eyes a lot more. That can be a really good indicator. I'm gonna turn this on again because she's gonna bring the whole herd over here. Carrie, there's nothing for you. Look at them. That lasted all of like what, 3 minutes, if. Okay, I'm much farther away from them now. We might have a few minutes. So that just means that, like I said, I have a lot of work to do, meaning I'm checking eyes, I'm checking body conditions, I'm checking energy levels, I'm watching water intake. It means I'm watching like a hawk. And so it's no wonder, like, I don't like to leave the farm because I am watching them like a hawk because we have taken away that safety blanket of having dewormer in their system for a while. But what's the pro to that? Because that seems like a con, right? Like you're not doing anything for them preventatively, like with an active treatment. Yeah, we're not. But the pro to that is that when I do use the dewormer on a goat that needs it and when they desperately need it, it will work because there will not be as much of a resistance buildup. And so it's a choice you have to make. Right now, our goats are doing really good and that's really great. So what happens when I see a goat acting off? It's simple. I collect their fecal in a little baggie. I collect anyone that looks off and anyone that they kind of stay by. So like if, let's say Weta was looking off, I would test Weta's fecal, I would test Bobo's fecal, and I would test Cupid's fecal because they all hang out together. And then if Weta's looking off, I'll also check Gus Gus and Hero just because Gus Gus and Hero are my 2 that don't handle the worm burden as well. Also probably Tilly, but Tilly's also in the front yard, so she's a little bit of a different case. But those are a few that I check just because Tilly's older. So that's what I do. I take in their fecal, they run the fecal sample, and they tell me what their egg count is. If their egg count is high, we treat those goats specifically with whatever the vet recommends based on what they saw. It'll always probably be the same worms just about, but we recommend, they ask us, you know, what dewormer did you do last cycle? How many times have you used this? And based on that, we will choose our dewormer. So like right now we're on valbazen. Our next will probably move to Pancure or ivermectin. I'm not excited to move to ivermectin, but it is an option because we were on Safeguard for a while. So Safeguard needs a lot of time to like stay out of their system and not build any more resistance. So that's like our active treatments, what we do. So then I have what we call passive prevention. And that's just stuff we're doing to help aid them. So y'all saw I did the goat minerals video. The minerals make sure that their mineral levels are intact, which helps their immune systems just stay boosted. That's great. That can help them fight anemia because I will say it time and time again, the worms don't kill them. The worms is not the cause of death. The cause of death is anemia because of the worms. So you're really fighting worms and anemia, but anemia is what kills them because the worms suck their blood. So minerals are going to help them fight anemia and just keep them as healthy as possible. They'll get their minerals from grain, they'll get their minerals from the ground, of course, but it's also good to give them free choice minerals, and inside the minerals there's salt content, so it encourages them to drink water. Water is imperative for them. It can help fluctuate their anemia levels, good or bad, if they're drinking a lot of water or not a lot of water. We found some of our goats that don't handle the worm burden weren't drinking a lot of water. Increase the water intake, boom, they're doing better. Crazy. So to do that, I entice them for water with lots of different water trots. I have them all over the place, and they also have access to the ponds, but I'm going to get to the ponds because that is why I made this video. But anyways, I have different water trots, different colors, different textures, different heights. Okay, so I have like rubber, I have plastic, I have stainless steel, I have long ones, I have short ones, I have tall ones. Because you know what? Goats especially are picky. And if they're picky, they need to have a lot of options. So if you don't like the one water trough I gave you and you're going to choose not to drink out of it, what am I going to do, right? So you have like 30 options. Pick one, right? And then it's important to keep those waters clean because goats are really picky about their water, and I'll get into that in just a minute. What else do you do? Dragging the pastures, that moves the fecal around, disturbs the life cycle of the eggs hatching into the larva, and that breaks it up. So dragging the pastures, meaning turning the poop over. And then also, what is the last thing we do? Pasture rotation. Pasture rotation is very important because when you take a ruminant off of a pasture for like, let's say 6 months, even 3 months can help, but really you want 6-month rotations, then the worms will not be picked up by them from that pasture that has the worm burden, and eventually they'll die because there are no hosts. So pasture rotate. Pasture rotate is what brings me to the ponds. My sister and I, my sister helps out a lot with my mom's goats. I do as well. And my sister took an AP environmental science class, which dealt a lot with water and just the environment. And so anytime I have any questions about a pond or anything, I call her, because I am not the best at like that area of science. I like biology. That's just me. And so she's really good with the environmental science, and she's not far out from it. And she really enjoyed the class. So I call her or my brother. They both took the class. So we were talking, and one of my goat mentors, Amanda, who was the previous owner of the Fainters, messaged me, and she's like, hey, you know, we've got barber pole running rampant here, you know, just be aware. What are y'all doing? You know, and so I just gave her the spiel I gave y'all, like, here's what we've been doing. We changed some things, yada, yada, yada. And and she's like, well, what do you think has made the biggest difference? And I was like, honestly, I think the waters, like, and then we were talking, and I was like, I've noticed though, like, we water and pasture rotate. I've noticed since we moved them to these pastures that they've been doing a lot better. And any animal that I've had susceptible to barber pole, I'm not saying I haven't had animals out on this pasture that haven't had a count, okay? Because they will. That's just gonna happen. They will have a count no matter what. They will never have 0. But there is an appropriate number for them to have. But every animal that I've had pass from barber pole worms has had access to, no, I don't mean the littles barn, the pasture after the littles barn. I call that the middle pasture and the pond pasture. Okay, every animal that we have had pass, now that I've just sat and had time to really reflect, any animal that since we've been here that has passed from barber pole, like confirmed barber pole, parasites slash barber pole, has been on that middle pasture, pond pasture, okay? I can't ever block them off from there, and that's fine because I drag that area. So what's the problem with that pasture? And we were talking about it, and she's like, hey, y'all have a pond in the pond pasture. That's why it's called the pond pasture. And I was like, yeah. She goes, did you have all of those water troughs when they were on the pond pasture? I was like, no, I had different ones, definitely not as many, not as different, enticing ones, and they had access to the pond pasture, so we weren't as worried, you know, we're like, that's a water source. And she's like, could it be your pond? Now, what does that mean? Let's start. Going back to where we said goats like really clean water. So our ponds are clean, okay? Our ponds are aerated. Well, not the back pond, but the front pond is aerated through a windmill system, meaning Lester, with brilliant idea, hooked up a windmill to an aerator, ran it underneath the ground into the pond. So whenever the windmill catches wind, it provides oxygen to the pond. So that is not still water per se. It is aerated. But think about the pond. This pond is a dirt bottom pond. You can't change that because of our location. It's just a dirt bottom pond. But I was talking to Amanda, and she's like, could it be the pond? Like, I know y'all treat, like I told her, I was like, we treat our ponds. We haven't dyed it in a while just because we haven't felt it necessary to dye it. But we do treat it. So there's not algae. Of course, if it's not getting enough wind, if it's not windy that day and the pond's not getting aerated, yes, a little bit of algae buildup's going to happen. But you know what? The next day, the wind will blow through and it will go away. That's just how it goes. But we were sitting there thinking, like, could it be the pond? And she's like, just food for thought. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to look into it. And so I called my sister. And I'm like, hey, I need you to answer an environmental science question. I told her everything that I told Amanda, and that I was like, you know, all of our goats that we've had pass from parasites had access to the pond and the middle pasture. Rika goes, well, why do you think the middle pasture? I was like, because it's not any different than any other pasture. So I was like, so it's not the middle pasture. It's probably not the middle pasture. This is also all speculation and just something we're going to try noticing how our goats have been. And she goes, so you think it's the pond? Why do you think it's the pond? I said, well, it's obviously not the weather, because no matter what, the weather and the humidity isn't going to change from the pond pasture to the back pasture. But the wet area, the worms thrive on more. But then we were like, but they're going to thrive in the pasture as well because of the humidity. So it's not the pond water. It's not the fecal from the birds. A lot of people seem to think it's that. Remember how I said host specific? Hi, pigs and birds, ducks, geese, chickens, they cannot carry barber pole worms because, again, they're host specific. Can they carry coccidia? Yes, but they can carry their own parasites as well, but they're host specific. So the worms that we have, our birds don't have, and aren't carrying and aren't doing in their fecal. And we've reduced our bird numbers in the pond. So that's not what's making the pond a problem. I think what the problem is, and this is just speculation. I asked Rika, I said, we know goats are picky about water, okay? What do they normally drink in the wild? She goes, well, we learned about that. Like, what do animals typically go for in the wild? Especially goats, they go for running water, meaning a river or a stream. It's very unlikely, unless a goat just doesn't have another option, that they're really going to go for a pond or a lake. Because think about it, even though it might have oxygen, that's still water. That's not fast moving water. Fast moving water is really clean. I mean, of course it still has microorganisms in it, but think about it. It's not sitting still. It's constantly aerated and moving. So that led us to go, I was like, but Rika, my pond is aerated, so it has oxygen. She's like, yeah, it has oxygen, Megan, but it's not moving. Yeah, it gets oxygen, but think about it. Your water's not moving, so it's still. What do you do to fix that? You can't. That's just how pond work. That's what a pond is. Ponds and lakes are still considered still water compared to a river or a stream. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? What does that mean in regards to the goats? Like, what is in the pond? She goes, well, you know, you have fish in the pond. You know, you have snakes probably in the pond. You have turtles in the pond. You have ecosystems in the pond, okay? You have frogs in the pond. So there's going to be thousands of microorganisms in there. This is purely from here is where the speculation gets. Could the microorganisms and just the stillness of the pond, is it causing the worms? No. But could it be not helping their immune system? Because if a goat does not have a strong immune system, they're not going to fight off the worms and the anemia. So could the pond not be compatible with their immune system? It's just making it just a little bit harder. Which brings us to the decision that Ellie and I are going to try out when we have to pasture rotate again. The pond is essential for our pigs. Our pigs will always be in the pond, have access to that. I don't know about the donkeys yet. We haven't made that decision, but specifically for the goats moving forward, when it is time to rotate them off of these pastures, they will have access to the littles barn and the middle pasture. The goats will no longer have access to the pond pasture because we're going to see if the pond really impacts their health. I have a gut feeling. I don't know. I think it might just be one more small, tiny adjustment we can make to help them, because we're not going to beat the parasites. We will never beat the parasites, but we can do everything we can to help them. And so that means you're gonna say, well, Megan, right now they have 1, 2, 3. They have the little bit of grass in the littles pasture. They have this pasture here and that pasture back there of grass to graze on. That's a lot. If you just give them the middle and the littles and close them off from this, what are they gonna do? Well, when we intend to pasture rotate, we'll move to winter. It'll be moving into winter, where the grass will have already probably died. That's coming up soon. And when we're supplementing them with hay. During the summer, they're not getting as much grain because it's very heavy and it makes them hotter. But during the winter, they get more grain and hay than they do during the summer. So they'll be supplemented. Where they're not having as much grazing, right, Carrie? They'll be supplemented more with their grain and with their hay. So they'll be totally fine. And they'll still have access to their water trots. That's why most of their water trots are in that little's barn pasture. Right now, there's a few in Nate's barn that they have access to in the chute. And then when we move them, I'll move those 2 trots back into the middle pasture for them. So all this said, this is all just speculation and all just things that we're going to try to do better. Is this rooted in any research? No. No, it's my best guess. It's things I've noticed behaviorally and based on patterns. And I feel like that's where we're at in our goat journey right now with our small ruminants. They just don't handle parasites well, and I need to do everything I can to help them ward them off, passively and actively. And so when we pasture rotate, they will not have access to the pond pasture. I do not want them drinking out of the pond, not because I think the pond is nasty, not because I think the pond is infested with like fecal matter that's making them sick. I think it just might be better for them to have fresh, clean well water than still water from the pond. I could be totally wrong. I'm totally open to the idea. But you know what? We're gonna try it. Hold on. Well, this is this isn't right. I'm not Hershey's. She just moved that wire. Hershey's. Ow, don't bite me, jerk. That hurt. Your teeth hurt. You're a big goat. Well, I guess we have to end the video here because I have to go get her. Maybe if I can get the other goats to come up to the front, she'll just climb back under. And now I have video evidence to show Ellie that we have to patch this area, right? Ow, your horns, hero. Oh, that hurt because that's not good. Good thing we have the dogs. Yeah, well, oh my gosh. Okay, y'all. This is where I have to end the video. I'm sorry I yapped for so long, but I feel like it's a good synopsis of everything, and knowledge is power. So the more information out there, the better anybody can do for their animals. So these are just my theories. I'm not going to say everything's proven. I'm not all right and all knowing. that's a problem, but these are just the patterns I've noticed with my goats. And if anything starts to go south and it doesn't work, we completely stop. Okay, guys, get off. Get off. Go, little mama. Okay, I gotta go fix this problem. Bye, friends.